Now this one might seem a bit daft, but how many of you have actually considered the homes we all live in? They're literally everywhere across the nation. With an extremely small number of exceptions, every settlement in the country, town, village or city has at least one house. Houses have developed massively since the earliest days of human history. Brand new ones being built as we speak are light years away from anything the Saxons or the Romans knew, for example. The building materials have changed dramatically, but so have the needs of the people living in them. We have very few houses that remain from the medieval period, but there are still a few examples. In those times, houses were often built of timber and were heated by fires. Only the wealthy could afford to live in houses built of anything else. Stone and brick were rare at that time. Houses were typically built individually in those days. The concept of the semi-detached house was totally unheard of until the advent of town planning in the Georgian era. That's when terraced houses began to be built, and before you knew it, our homes could accommodate more and more people. Rapid population growth in the 19th century saw terraced housing built in huge swathes, especially during the Industrial Revolution. Terraces defined inner city areas with the widespread adoption of mass-produced bricks. The days of the individual house was well and truly over. You were likely to be renting your house in those days from a landlord. People moved in so rapidly that there was not enough capital to build adequate housing for everyone, and that meant low-income families were often squeezed into increasingly overcrowded slums. House prices, though, were attractive. They actually fell consistently in the 70 years between 1840 and 1910 due to the expansion of the railways. That had another effect. Land, which was previously a long way from urban centres, was all of a sudden more desirable to build on. The increase was staggering. In 1801, the UK had just 1.6 million houses. By 1911, just 110 years later, we had a mind-blowing 7.6 million. Nearly 5 million of them were built between 1870 and 1914, an average of around 110,000 per year. The private rent market provided 90% of the housing before World War I, but afterwards it went into a prolonged decline. In 1938, it only covered 58% of the housing stock. Also, during the interwar period came slum clearances and the birth of what we know today as council houses. After World War II, housing stock in the UK was suffering a critical shortage. Air raids had destroyed 500,000 homes. Some 3 million new dwellings were needed, and the government aimed for 300,000 to be built annually compared to the maximum pre-war rate of 350,000. And so, major cities built large-scale estates full of council housing. When we walked around North Solihull earlier this year, we saw a raft of typical council estates, all constructed as overspill from Birmingham following World War II slum clearances. These houses were vastly different to terraces. Whilst terraced housing usually hugged the pavement, council housing was set back from the road on spacious, open-plan, often curving streets. They often had long gardens too. Council estates encouraged shopping centres, churches and pubs to spring up nearby. In the 1970s, with space becoming an issue, the tendency was to build upwards, not outwards. Cities gained tall tower blocks. They were often denounced as barracks for the working classes by some, but they were an effective solution to overcrowding and the issue of high rents. Increasingly, the British ideal was home ownership, even among the working class. Rates of home ownership rose steadily from 15% of people owning their own home before 1914 to 32% by 1938 and 67% by 1996. The construction industry sold the idea of home ownership to upscale renters. And so now, the vast majority of brand new houses built in Britain are occupied by their owners, usually via mortgages. The idea has come a long way since being seen as a millstone around your neck. Having a mortgage now is considered to be a valuable, long-term investment.